Hi, good morning, and welcome to Sales Stories with Nate Teske. I'm your host, Nate Teske, and I'm with me today is my co-host, Rob Sullivan. And collectively, we have 30 plus years each, so 60 plus years total of professional sales experience. And our guest today is a former customer of mine, Eric Reibsane. And Eric, thank you for taking time to meet with us here today.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm excited about this. This will be fun, and we'll get to reminisce a little bit about when Nate was my AE actively selling to me, and we'll talk a little bit and get into why after that experience, almost 20 years later, we're friends, and that relationship has endured. I think that's an important point we'll touch on today.
Yeah, 24 years actually. Time goes
Wow.
fast, which I'm too young to have worked with somebody 24 years ago.
I know. Same here.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much for making time, Eric. We know you're super busy and have a lot of plate, but we're really excited about the discussion with you because you've had a 30 plus year career in IT, and you've had the benefit of working with a lot of different companies and organizations. So love to hear your experience on, what you really liked about certain sales cycles with certain sales reps, and then, things you'd like to maybe see done differently. Because our target that we're doing this podcast for is not only newer sales execs that are going from maybe more transactional role or a business
Mhm.
development role into an account exec role where, they're selling multi-million dollar contracts or $1 million plus contracts, very different
Right.
animal, right, than the transactional stuff. So I'd love to hear your experience on that side of it and, what you have dealt with over the years from, being in the IT leadership role.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you're using the word transactional because there's a big thread of what I'm going to talk about that relates to that mindset.
Yep.
I function at the enterprise level. That's where clients bring me in to help figure out what do they need, who can provide it, how do they contract for it, how do they successfully implement it, and then how do they successfully move into operating it. So I've worked with many of the big name enterprise providers, not just in ERP and CRM, but in other things such as EHR and all that stuff. And there's a common thread that honestly is a standard that you kind of helped set for me, Nate, 24 years ago. When Nate and I were working together, it was an interesting time in the ERP space around the products that we had deployed in my environment. I was the CIO, and the solutions that Nate and his firm were providing. We don't need to get into details because they don't really add color, but it was there was a lot of trust and faith needed for us even to have a conversation about it, because for me as a buyer, and I think a lot of you guys will have to keep me straight on the right terms, but AEs or sales reps sometimes don't appreciate is the amount of internal pressure that a buyer has, even if they're a VP, a CIO, a CFO, a COO, pick a title. Okay. There are expectations of the business that they're trying to meet. And in a lot of these enterprise solutions, their career rides on this decision. If you don't make the sale, maybe it's the end of but not likely. That's part of the process. For the buyer, it's a whole different risk profile because they're going to commit not just dollars, but they're going to commit resources and time from the company that may be, or in all likelihood, are highly constrained. Where Nate and I established a relationship early on is Nate did a good job of, number one, being truthful. Nate called things as he saw them, and that made me comfortable. I felt like he was in the boat rowing with me, not somehow pulling the boat, trying to tow me in some specific direction. And we got to a point where I could talk to him about, hey, this is what's happening internally. Here's why this has been difficult for me to try to move down the field. Part of it was just my characters. I don't like to waste people's time. Because I think that's disrespect. So that's a note for buyers. Don't be disrespectful. Don't be abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be honest with them and say, I don't know where this is going to end, Nate. I can't promise you that this is going to work out, and here's why. And Nate had dealt with that at other clients, other prospects, and that created an opportunity for him to coach me a little bit too. So again, this is kind of towards the buyer. It's okay for you to listen to your AE. If they're a straight shooter, if they are working in your best interest, that's okay. You can hear what they have to say. You can hear about their experiences. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're acquiescing and giving them the upper hand and doing what they want. you're going to know right away as a buyer. You will pick those people off.
Yeah.
So let's talk about if we flip that and the standard that Nate set for my future interactions with AEs was that I then expected, I realized that it was okay to have an honest AE, and it was reasonable for me to expect that. And if I got an AE that was not that, I had them replaced at the very beginning of the discussion. I'm like, hey, we're just not going to work together well. You're going to have to, I think the product or solution might be viable, but you and I we're not going to reach a conclusion together. Not an easy conversation, but again, sometimes you have to have those hard conversations out of respect for everyone's time.
Right.
Because you can do damage to your relationship to a company that you might want to do business with by jerking them around. They'll get frustrated. They'll feel like you're not believable, whatever. And that went through my career, and you have a future guest coming, I think, that also worked with me as an AE, and I think she'll share the same perspective. That became my standard expectation of all my AEs. And I think that, the benefit that Nate brought to me with that was I think that just made my life a lot better as a CIO because I could make that call early. I knew what it was like to have the right AE as a partner. For the AEs, I have seen so many things happen because I understand they have pressure too.
Mm-hmm.
They have quotas, they have quarter ends, they have month ends, they have all. At the same time, the products that they're trying to sell or services they're trying to sell are in flight. They're in motion. They're evolving, and you're trying to sell the jet aircraft while you're in flight and changing the engine. So something that you said is available just got pulled, or something you said is not available just got added.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an easy life. I think where I see a lot of, I hate to use the word a lot of, so I'm going to meld together a number of vendors because I don't want to just call out a specific vendor over one AE or one experience, because I've worked with a bunch of these people multiple times. And you guys can probably chime in here on whether this is an experience thing, or whether it's an EQ, EI thing. But I think that a lot of AEs confuse urgency and execution with panic and pressure. If we're having a conversation that's going on for more than a few weeks, I've seen a lot of AEs just kind of have a mini meltdown. And then they start pressuring the buyer. Well, are we going to get something done here? Are we going to and they start pushing you for a commitment and a deadline and all that. And again, I know they're being asked for it, but the reality is if you look at what the buyer's dealing with, they're selling as well. They're talking to the leadership of the company, and the leadership of the company are like, are you sure this is going to work? Well, I think so. Well, we're not going to sign off on a $2 million investment because you think so. So your buyer is under tremendous pressure as well to rationalize and figure out, is this going to work? Because they're on the line for it. They're speaking for it. They're owning it. And at the same time, they have a whole set of constituents that maybe implemented a competing product somewhere in another life, or they implemented the product you're looking at and they didn't have a good outcome. So your buyer has all of those different constituents weighing in. On my last company, we tried to put that in and we spent X amount of dollars, X amount of months, and we never got anything out of it. What they don't say is that we had no idea what we wanted. We didn't commit the right resources. We didn't make sure we had the right product. They don't get into those 100 reasons why the buyer has a high degree of accountability for the outcome. They don't want to be to blame, but that's what your buyer's hearing. So now your buyer's hearing like, well, I don't want that to happen to me. And then you have somebody who has some off the wall thing that you've never heard of before that they read about on the airplane, but they think that's what you should buy. And so the buyer needs time to process all that, to build consensus within their organization. And the AEs that I've seen be most successful are a contributor to the process the buyer's going through, where you can call them and say, hey, they're throwing this at me. A good example, major ERP decision for a private equity portfolio company. And one of the senior VP or C-level people had been through a terrible experience with the implementation, turned into a lawsuit, very public. And we were there to try to bring peace and help figure out what product they should go with. So we had a very agnostic view, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? And then that wrench got thrown at us. Well, if that happens here, you know that that's going to come back on you guys. Okay, well, you aren't even in the same industry. Not even close. I actually happen to know the people that did the implementation, and the buyer, I knew him really well, and I knew why that went bad. It had nothing to do really with the product. But that's what we're fighting internally, is somebody had the either good or bad experiences. And we'll come back to, hey, what happened at ABC Co? Because this is getting thrown in my face that so-and-so was there and it went off the rails, and it's because you guys suck. That's where the AE can be a contributor to helping that buyer navigate a complex situation by being honest. Well, we had recommended an implementer who did not do a good job. Okay, that's an honest answer. I can work with that. Doesn't mean the product's bad, but implementers can blow things up and do a bad job. That can happen. The client was not prepared. The client underestimated the amount of time it was going to take them, what their resource commitment was going to be, those types of things. Getting that information from my partner who's helping as my AE and is contributing as my AE gives me the ammo to try to move the ball down. Is this making sense?
Yeah, very much. And I want to, there's so much that you're sharing that's really powerful, and I want to dig into this a bit. So on the one hand, you're very aware and objective and fair, and it would seem, in your assessment of where things are going wrong. And you know, it's not necessarily about pointing fingers, but about being just realistic. Saying, hey, you know, we weren't ready, or they weren't ready, or whatever was going on. But the thing that really struck me was the conversations that you said you had with some of the reps, where it's like, you and I are not going to work. Curious how many of them came back years later and thanked you, because I would imagine if they were self-aware, they might have done just that.
The reality is very few, because very few of them lasted in the profession.
That's fair. Yeah.
They just didn't make it. You know, they weren't able to make a living because they didn't have the right mindset. And it wasn't just a problem with me. I just was cutting it off at the beginning and not wasting time. And most of them, a year and a half later, they were in sales ops, or they were in the program management office, or they were something. They were no longer an AE. Because they just, most of the time, that is an EI, EQ thing. They just don't have the emotional intelligence or the emotional quotient. Doesn't mean they aren't smart people, but emotionally, they have a combative mindset to their approach of they're going to defeat the buyer and win.
Great strategy, not.
That does not work.
Particularly if you run into the wrong buyer, they're going to double down, dig in, and they're going to be like, oh, you know what I mean? It gets personal, and not a good strategy. But there's a lot of them. I hate using that word, but there's a reason there's like this premier level of AEs, people who do it for 30 years and have tremendous success. And then there's the churn factory of, I see it all the time. We'll have a rep on one account and we'll come back for another account, reach out, they're gone all the time. I mean, the churn rate in that profession is really, I don't know what, you guys probably know what the statistics are, or at least have a gut feel of what it is. It's a lot. And a lot of them that churn out of the profession. I mean, is that consistent? You guys are on the inside. Is that what you guys see?
Yes. Yeah. And it's the 80-20 rule. 80% are, I don't want to say bad, but they just don't get it. 20%, which are the people that Rob and I are interviewing that do get it, because and one thing that you said that was really key is the tremendous pressure that your buyer is under. I don't think salespeople have an appreciation for that. You said it's a it's a career defining decision. I remember the biggest transaction I ever did in my career, the CIO, where I'm sitting at the table with him and he goes, look, we're giving you the crown jewels of the company.
Right.
He said, if you guys screw this up, it's not only my job, but it's millions of dollars that is going to impact the company on top of me getting fired. And I've been doing it long enough. I knew that already, but I don't think enough salespeople appreciate that pressure.
Yeah.
Executive or whoever you're dealing with in the IT group is under, because in some ways, depending on what you're selling, they either haven't done a transaction like that, and having an appreciation for that pressure is you have to have it. If you don't acknowledge it, you can't. To your point, you have to sometimes be very brutally honest, because people would sometimes say to me, hey, this sounds too good to be true. What's the catch?
Right.
Because everyone is skeptical when it comes down to it. And someone that we interviewed, one of our first interviews was a former VP of mine. The comment that he had made was, look, if you don't talk about the gap out of the gate, they're going to think you're hiding something.
100%.
And his point was, if you talk about a specific gap that's not going to kill your deal, there may be 3 or 4 other gaps that are going to be a real big challenge. And because you pointed out the fact that this is one of the gaps, but here's how customers address it, in many cases, that client forgets about those other 3 or 4 other things and you move forward, because no solution is 100% perfect.
None.
I just think that the thing that I've learned over the years is the brutal honesty aspect of it is huge. You have you can't hide things. And the other thing I would say is, and you know this very well, Eric, customers can smell bullcrap better than anyone.
We got the start.
I mean, they just, you can't, there's no reason to sugarcoat things. If there's a gap, address it head on and say, this is what problem, or not the problem. This is what you're not going to get with our solution. And when you do that, most customers don't expect that, first of all. Right? Yeah. Most salespeople are like, hey, we're the greatest thing and we're going to solve all your problems. Well, no, that's not true. Talk about what the gap is and address it head on, and your credibility just goes up a level when you do that.
Yeah, and I think AEs underestimate the mastery that the buyer and the buyer team has over their processes and how things work in their business. They have mastery of it. So when you come in with this superficial answer about how something is solved, they are going to drag you through the thorns. Yep. Because they're going to say, okay, but what about this detail around the transaction? Whether I'm just going to throw things out like revenue recognition or fixed assets or the general ledger or any of 1,000 topics, you will never compete with their depth of understanding of it.
Correct.
As an AE, you won't. It's not your profession. But also they have mastery of how the company does it today. And if you try to skip over their concerns, you're just going to get mowed down. And every time an AE does that, they create more trouble for the buyer. Because what happens behind the scenes, because people are generally polite, is those people they're generally not going to be senior level people. They're not going to be VPs. They're going to be execution people, managers, directors, things like that. I think AEs sometimes just underestimate their influence in a decision, because behind closed doors, those people are heard very loud because they're the experts. But their boss, who is an SVP or a VP or a C level, is asking them, hey, is this shit going to work? Like, should I sign off on this? I mean, you got to live with it. Are you telling me that you're going to be able to get our day-to-day done with this? Whether it's a solution, software, it doesn't matter what it is. There's a business goal. They aren't buying it because it's cool. They aren't doing that. They're solving a problem. So if you blow off those folks or you try to BS them, that they are very detailed. They are gonna grind you into the dirt. So one of the things that when I was thinking about our conversation today is if I could talk to a new AE or an experienced one, covers the gamut. Be an expert at being the teammate to the buyer in helping them define their problem statement. Don't get so excited to sell 13 modules plus the new product and all this other stuff. You're not there yet because you don't know what the problem is. The buyer knows that. You're throwing stuff at them and they're just sitting there letting it bounce off their chest because they're like, you haven't even gotten close to the pin yet. And it erodes your credibility in the process. But if you can step back and be like the person that asks the best questions, immediate credibility. You actually want to hear what we have to say before you try to shove stuff down my neck. Okay. All right. I got it. This makes sense to me now. I understand how we're going to go about this. And when you're asking great questions, you show at least the level of understanding you have of the industry, which may be small. And you might say that I'm not an expert in this industry. Okay. I know what our tools do. I know what our solutions are. I'm going to need your help to understand the definition of what you're trying to solve. And then I have a whole team of people that are going to help me map that to how we can help you and where we can't. There's just straight up, there's going to be things, I don't know what they're going to be because I don't know the details like you guys do. There'll be something that we find that we're either going to have to be creative and come up with another solution or a workaround or a partner product that we have in our ecosystem, something like that. But let's start, like, what are you guys really trying to do? Do not do it from a financial perspective. So what % of savings are you hoping to achieve through this product? I don't know. because I have no idea what problems your product solves for me, and you have no idea what problems I'm trying to solve.
Yeah.
So when people lead with, well, what's your budget for this? Turn off. I know it's a qualifying question, but you're going to get a bullshit answer or an agitated answer. Nobody's going to pull out the conversation because any budget's going to be an order of magnitude, or what we call a ROM, a rough order of magnitude, because we don't know yet. We don't know what particular idiosyncrasies are in our problem that are going to require an add-on. Or in a lot of the SaaS products today, there's this base level of functionality, but if you actually want it to work, you have to get the plus version, which has a different recurring monthly cost. So nobody actually is very successful at figuring out anything greater than a rough order of magnitude, which can be plus or minus 20, 30%. Creation mode. And for the seller, many of those concepts and topics are boilerplate. They've done it for 50 clients, right? Somebody's going to pull it out and they're going to get it together and they're going to do that. The caveat I want to add to that is I have run over many AE or sales teams for this. If you show up with a 40, 50, 100 slide deck, I'm going to shut you down. Hey, we're not going to do this, because what they do is they step through, they don't know what they're talking about. They're reading it. And the first thing I'm going to tell them is, I'm going to give you 12 slides, your cover slide count. So tell me what you're trying to tell me, because I am not going to sit here for the next 2 hours and stare at all these slides. I have a lot of shit to get done. This isn't the only thing on my agenda. I have a lot of work. I'm responsible for a lot of different things, and this is one of them. So you've got to be super clear, super efficient in your messaging. I'm unimpressed by the volume of slides.
Probably a negative correlation, if anything.
Yeah. Like, you're better off coming in with 3 slides that talk about the one problem we've talked about. So Eric, I heard you say about this, and we have that feature in the greater product, but I want to talk about that problem, how we solve it. And my hope is that we get the opportunity to start talking about the other problems we solve too. Right. But let me focus on what you asked me. Let me be responsive. Show me you listen. Right. Because that's the beginning of our relationship.
So what I want to play back is what I'm hearing, and I love this because it's exactly the kind of thing that we like to teach, is that at the beginning of the relationship, if you were to chart it out, the needs are the most important thing. And you got to get the needs handled in terms of what's the issue, what's the problem, what's the opportunity. As you're moving forward in the cycle, then it's more about, okay, what are the different potential alternatives that we could be looking at? And then only later, once you've identified that, if you're convinced that it makes sense to invest maybe more than you even thought at the beginning, then you could probably go and secure the budget for that. But you have to be sold on that whole concept even before you get there. So there really isn't a point in having much of a conversation around budget at the beginning, because to your point, it could change based on the journey.
Honestly, this is, I'm giving away the church's secrets here, but I don't think I've in 30 years worked with or for an organization that knew what the budget was for it. They didn't. And that's a lot of reps, this first question they ask, well, what's the budget? I'm not going to get into that right now. We're not going to lead with that. Well, then how am I going to know what I'm going to do? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to stop asking me about the budget and you start trying to understand what I'm trying to accomplish. What problem am I trying to solve? Let's focus on that. And I don't know, you guys would have to coach me on this. I don't know if that's because there's this mandated set of steps they have to go through, or is that something they're told you have to ask this in the first visit to determine whether we're going to go forward? I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, well, it comes to what I've seen is that people, they use it as a qualifying question. To your point, it's not a great qualifying question. They want to know that they're not wasting their time. But here's the thing. If they're talking to a big company about an enterprise solution, there's money. There's a realistic belief in my mind that they have to trust that there's money there. This is not a mom-and-pop organization that is not going to make payroll next week. That if I'm convinced, or if I as the buyer, I'm convinced that there's a problem that this person can help me solve, and this is an investment, not an expense, I will find money for it.
Sales reps would just step back for 1 second and think, hey, Eric's got a lot of stuff on his plate. If he's committing time to this is valid, right? They're serious about thinking about this because Eric is going to filter things out of his day that don't matter. He's not looking to be stroked by vendors or have conversations because it's fun or whatever. He's got a lot of stuff to accomplish, a lot of responsibilities. And this is true of all your buyers, most of your buyers, maybe not all, but the majority of your buyers, this got added to their plate.
Yep.
Hey, listen, we're getting ready to make this change in the organization, whether it's expanding a product line, adding a new service. We've made an acquisition and it's kind of pushed us over the line of critical mass in our ability to do consolidated financial reporting. It's going to be something like that comes onto their plate that they now have to solve. They're not going to commit time just to waste yours. So if you're actually making contact, this is a pet peeve of mine. If somebody is making contact with you on my behalf, treat them like you would treat me.
Right.
Okay. Because I just put it on their plate.
Well, and that's a really good point you bring up. There's two comments I want to make on that. There was a rep I worked with years ago, and she was a very good rep. She had a Freudian slip on a call where she told the customer, "Look, I know you're just the messenger." And when she was telling me the story, and I heard it through secondhand, like as soon as she said it, she's like, "Oh shit, I just totally screwed up. I said that." And the lady she said it to was like, "Boom. Okay, you're done. I'm not working with you anymore." And anyway, they ended up doing the deal and it all worked out. She was a very good rep, but sometimes you make a mistake, right?
She's human. Yeah, we're imperfect by nature.
Exactly. And the one comment you made about the slide deck, marketing always has a ton of content that they want to package up and go show this to the customer. And some slide decks we have are like 30, 40 slides deep. And I would joke around like in a first meeting with, after we did the qualification, you do a presentation, I joke around and say, "Hey, I hope you guys are ready because I've got 40 slides today and I'm going to go through every one of them because it's great content we're going to cover." And I would say it like real seriously. And I would just see, like, if I'm not in the meeting with them or I'm, in the web meeting, I would just look at their faces. I'd pause for a second. And some people would be like, because I work with a lot of East Coast, New York, they're like, "Please tell me you're kidding." Like, I'm totally kidding. I may talk to 3 or 4 slides, but I'll send you the deck after the fact that, through our conversation, there may be something in there that I want to point out, like you said, Eric, here's the one thing we're trying to fix. Okay, slide 20 talks about how we do that. And slide 21 as a client, you did it.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do. If you can get to that, you'll get to, here, so to speak, in the ACLA of sales training, circa 1990s.
The slickest way I've ever seen anybody handle that. And I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. In PowerPoint, you can create like these, I think it even calls them hidden. You can see it's like a section.
Yep.
And what they did is they drug out all of those and put them in another section. So we could see that there were slides there. And they said, "Listen, this is, my boss calls. I did have all the slides available for this conversation. Okay. They're all down here in the things I'm not going to take you through. What I'm going to focus on is the things you wanted me to talk to you about."
Yep.
And I was like, that was slick. That,
yeah,
because I knew the boss wasn't going to call and nobody was going to get in trouble. But I thought it was a neat way of saying, "Hey, I heard you. I'm going to be efficient with your time. If you want to go into this other stuff, I have it right at my fingertips. So if you ask me a question and it's in here, I can go right to that. But I'm not going to drag you through it. I'm going to respect your time. I'm going to focus on the things that you want me to focus on." And I just thought that was a neat way to do it.